Story 1. David Hicks was born on January 15, 1962. He was a black male. He grew up in a rural area near Teague, Texas. Teague is a small town with a highway nearby, and not much else. David had a grandmother named O'Culler Hager. She was an older woman who lived alone in her own small frame house outside of Teague. David also had other family members in the same area. He had a cousin named Lester Busby. He had another relative named Eddie Branch. David grew up knowing these people because they all lived close to each other. When David was a young man, he started getting into trouble with the law. In 1979, when he was 17 years old, he was convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. That was his first felony. He did not stop his bad behavior after that. In 1984, David was convicted of false imprisonment. This crime involved putting someone at substantial risk of serious bodily injury. He was sent to prison for that crime as well. In 1986, David committed more crimes. He was convicted of burglary of a vehicle. He was also convicted of burglary of a habitation. For these crimes, he received a sentence of 10 years in prison. He served 15 months of that sentence. Then he was released on parole in 1987. After his release, David went back to the Teague area. He was 26 years old in 1988. He did not have a job. He spent his time hanging around the rural community where he grew up. He drank beer with friends and family members. He had a wife, but their relationship was not stable. David also had other unproven bad acts from his past. He had been involved in many assaults, both in prison and outside of prison. He had resisted arrest. He had escaped from custody 2 times. He had fled from police officers. He had evaded arrest. He had committed small thefts. But none of these had led to a long prison stay. By April 1988, David was living on parole. He was free but had no job. He spent his days and nights moving between the homes of relatives and friends in Teague. He often drank alcohol. He was known to some people in town as someone who could be violent. But on the morning of April 25, 1988, nothing unusual had happened yet. David was just another unemployed man in a small Texas town, trying to get by. On the evening of April 25, 1988, David Hicks went with his cousin Lester Busby to visit his grandmother, O'Culler Hager. This was not unusual. David often visited her because she lived close by. Before David and Lester went inside, they saw Eddie Branch outside the house. Eddie was another relative. Eddie had just finished his daily visit with Mrs. Hager. Eddie left, and then David and Lester walked into the house. They talked with Mrs. Hager for about 10 to 15 minutes. At around 7:15 p.m., the 2 cousins left the house. When they walked out, Mrs. Hager was still awake. She was sitting and watching television. She was wearing her housecoat. From there, David and Lester went to the home of Ethel and Robert Porter. The Porter house was about 1.5 blocks away from Mrs. Hager's home. When they arrived, they visited with the Porters and another person named Jesse Gibson. David stayed for a short while. Then he left to go eat at his father's house. After he ate, he came back to the Porter's house. Then David, Lester, and Jesse Gibson went to buy beer. They bought the beer and returned to the Porter's house. They visited and drank for some time. Eventually, David and Lester left the Porter's house. They went to Lester's house. Lester's house was located right next door to Mrs. Hager's home. The 2 cousins sat outside or near Lester's house. They continued to drink beer and talk. This went on for a while. At approximately 9:30 p.m., David told Lester that he was going home. Lester went inside his own house. Lester did not watch where David went after that. David did not go home. Instead, David walked back to his grandmother's house. The house was right next door to Lester's house, so it was only a few steps away. When David went inside Mrs. Hager's house, he had a plan. Prosecutors later believed that he planned to steal money from her. He knew she had money because Lester had just given her some cash to pay back a debt. David wanted that money. Once inside, David attacked his grandmother. He took a hammer that hung on the inside door of Mrs. Heger's kitchen cabinet. Family members knew that this hammer was kept there. David used the hammer to hit Mrs. Heger on the head and neck. He hit her many times. The autopsy later showed at least 8 blows from a blunt instrument. The blows were massive and caused severe damage to her head and neck. The attack did not happen in just one place. The evidence suggested that Mrs. Heger was first attacked in her bedroom. She was hit hard enough to lose consciousness. She was left lying in the bedroom, injured but still alive. Then David left the house for a period of time. The medical examiner later determined that Mrs. Heger lay unconscious in her bedroom for 2 to 3 hours. During that time, she woke up or regained some strength. She dragged herself from the bedroom to the kitchen. She was trying to get help or move away from where she was attacked. David did not stay away. He returned to the house later that night. When he came back, he found his grandmother in the kitchen. She was injured and weak, but still alive. At that point, David sexually assaulted her. The assault happened at or near the time of death. David also used a knife at some point during the crime. He caused a superficial stab wound to her neck. He continued to beat her with the hammer. He also used a wooden doorstop to shatter her skull. The final blows killed her. After the murder, David took the hammer with him. He did not put it back in the kitchen cabinet. He also had blood on his clothes. He later drove his car somewhere. Blood from the crime got onto the clothes inside his car. David then tried to hide what he had done. The next day, he visited with friends and family as if nothing had happened. He did not tell anyone about the attack. He did not call for help for his grandmother. On the morning of April 26, 1988, at approximately 9:15 a.m., a neighbor came to Mrs. Heger's house. The neighbor found her body lying in the kitchen. She was in a pool of blood. Her head had been crushed. Her blood was splashed onto the walls. The neighbor saw that something terrible had happened and notified the authorities. The hammer David used was missing from the kitchen cabinet. 2 weeks later, on May 8, 1988, Lester Busby found the hammer lying in his own yard. Lester was certain the hammer had not been there right after the murder. A deputy sheriff had searched Lester's yard the day after the murder, and the hammer was not there at that time. Someone had placed the hammer in Lester's yard after the initial police search. After the neighbor found Mrs. Heger's body on the morning of April 26, 1988, the police were called to the house. They arrived and saw the scene. They took photographs of the body and the kitchen. They also searched the rest of the house. They saw blood in the bedroom as well. This told them that the attack had started in the bedroom and moved to the kitchen. The police collected evidence from the house. They looked for fingerprints, hair, fibers, and any other items that might belong to the killer. They also took samples from the victim's body. These samples would later be tested for semen. The medical examiner performed an autopsy. The autopsy confirmed that Mrs. Heger had been beaten at least 8 times on the head and neck. The autopsy also confirmed that she had been sexually assaulted. The police began asking questions. They talked to family members and neighbors. They learned that David Hicks had visited his grandmother on the night of April 25th. They also learned that David had been seen in the area around the time of the murder. The police identified David as a suspect. The police searched David's car. Inside the car, they found clothes that had what looked like blood on them. They took those clothes for testing. The testing was presumptive, which meant it showed that the stains were likely blood. Later, more advanced testing would be done. The police also looked for the missing hammer. They searched the area around Mrs. Heger's house and Lester's house. They did not find the hammer right away. But on May 8, 1988, Lester Busby found the hammer in his own yard. He gave it to the police. Forensic testing on the hammer showed traces of blood, though the lab could not say for certain whether it was human blood or animal blood. David Hicks was arrested and charged with capital murder. The charge was murder committed during the course of aggravated sexual assault. He was taken to the Freestone County Jail to await trial. While he was in jail, 3 other inmates came forward to talk to the authorities. Those inmates were Patrick Comalander, Roger Dale Johnson, and Carter Curvin. These inmates testified later in court. Comalander and Johnson said that David asked them questions while in jail. He asked them how to get blood out of clothes. He also asked how many times clothes had to be washed to remove all traces of blood. Curvin testified that he asked David directly if he had killed his grandmother. David told Curvin that he had. David also threatened to hurt Curvin if he told anyone. Curvin also said that David told him he had used a knife during the murder. At that time, the fact that a knife was used was not yet known to the public. Only the police and the killer would have known that detail. David Hicks went to trial in January 1989. His trial took place in the 87th Judicial District Court of Freestone County, Texas. The prosecution presented all the evidence. They showed the autopsy results. They showed the hammer. They showed the testimony from the 3 jail inmates. They also presented DNA evidence. In 1989, DNA testing was still a new technique in courtrooms. Scientists took the semen samples from Mrs. Heger's body and her robe. They compared those samples to David's DNA. The results excluded every suspect except David Hicks. This meant that the semen belonged to David. David pleaded not guilty. His lawyers argued that the DNA evidence was not reliable. They said that because David was related to his grandmother, the DNA match might not be accurate. The jury did not accept this argument. On January 30th, 1989, the jury found David Hicks guilty of capital murder. On February 1st, 1989, the trial court held a sentencing hearing. Under Texas law at that time, a conviction for capital murder carried only 2 possible sentences: life in prison or death. The jury decided that David should receive the death penalty. The judge sentenced him to death by lethal injection. David appealed his case automatically to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. On March 31st, 1993, that court affirmed his conviction and sentence. He then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case. On June 20th, 1994, the Supreme Court refused to hear it. David then filed a state habeas corpus petition. This is a legal request asking the court to review whether his imprisonment was lawful. On March 26, 1997, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied his request without even holding a hearing. He then filed a federal habeas petition. The federal district court ordered additional DNA testing in 1999. The new DNA test was even more conclusive than the first one. It again matched David and excluded everyone else. On January 11, 1999, the federal district court denied his petition. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals also denied him permission to appeal. David continued to say he was innocent. He wrote letters from death row claiming that evidence had been ignored. He said his wife had been threatened by other family members. He said a syringe and foreign hair found at the crime scene had never been tested. However, no court accepted these claims. The DNA evidence remained the strongest fact in the case. On January 20th, 2000, David Hicks was taken to the death chamber in Texas. He was given a lethal injection. He was pronounced dead after 6 p.m. He was 38 years old. O'Culler Heger was 88 years old when she was killed. David Hicks became the 202nd person executed in the United States since 1976 and the 3rd person executed in Texas in the year 2000. The case of David Hicks was closed with his death, and his grandmother's murder remained one of the most violent crimes ever seen in Freestone County, Texas. Story 2. Larry Keith Robison was born on August 12, 1957 in Texas. His mother was Lois Robison. His biological father died of brain cancer when Larry was 2 years old. After his father died, Lois had to raise 4 children by herself. When Larry was 5 years old, Lois met a man named Ken Robison. Ken had 2 children from a previous marriage. Lois and Ken started dating. They could not afford babysitters, so they took all the children on their dates. They went to drive-in movies with sandwiches and cookies. They married later. Together, Lois and Ken had 2 more children. In total, they raised 8 children. Larry was the 3rd child and the first son. As a young boy, he was quiet and easygoing. He was a good baby. His mother said he was very smart. He did very well in school. He joined the Boy Scouts. He went to Sunday school. He was on the swim team. He played in the school band. He was an avid reader. There were no problems with his behavior at that time. When Larry was 12 years old, things began to change. He started having spells where he felt extremely frightened. He disrupted his classes. His grades dropped from straight A's to lower marks. He began collecting strange things like many pencils and staplers. His parents noticed something was wrong, but they did not know what it was. In high school, Larry started using drugs. He smoked marijuana. He also used amphetamines, tranquilizers, LSD, and PCP. He ran away from home. He suffered from bouts of irrational fear. He began hearing voices. His parents took him to a psychiatric center in Kansas City, but the doctors could not identify his problem. They also took him to a mental health center in Fort Worth. That center could not help him either. When Larry was 15 years old, his mother placed him in an outpatient treatment facility in Kansas. The doctors there did not diagnose what was wrong with him. Later, Lois tried to put Larry in a private hospital in Fort Worth. The cost was $200 per day. The family did not have medical insurance that covered Larry because he was over 21 and unemployed. They could not afford the cost. The hospital refused to keep him. A county hospital kept Larry for 30 days, but they let him go because he was not violent. A VA hospital in Waco also kept him for 30 days, and they also released him because he was not violent. At age 17, Larry joined the United States Air Force. He served for 1 year. During that time, he began hallucinating. He received an honorable discharge because of his condition. After leaving the Air Force, Larry believed he could move things with his mind. He built a plywood pyramid and slept under it. He thought the pyramid would give him special powers. He thought people could read his mind. He believed the CIA and the Air Force were chasing him. He thought the news on television was sending him secret messages. Larry got married during this time. The marriage lasted only a few weeks. He worked briefly as a wallboard hanger. He also worked construction jobs. He called his parents sometimes and begged for help. He told them his roommates were trying to hurt him. He said he had been flying out of his body over Fort Worth while singing the story of his life. Emergency room doctors diagnosed Larry as a paranoid schizophrenic. They said he needed long-term treatment. But because Larry was 21 and his parents' insurance did not cover him, the hospital discharged him. His mother tried again and again to get him help. Each time, the hospital let him go because he was not violent or because there was no insurance. In 1979, Larry was arrested for stealing a truck. His parents decided not to post bail. They left him in jail for 6 months. They hoped the judge would commit Larry to a mental hospital. The judge did not do that. Lois wrote a letter to her attorney. She said she was afraid for Larry to be turned loose on the streets again. She said a doctor at the VA hospital told her that if Larry did not get treatment, he would continue to get worse and could be a danger to himself and others. Eventually, a residential drug treatment program accepted Larry. He completed that program. He went back to working construction jobs. He had a daughter with a woman. The woman left because Larry's behavior frightened her. In June 1982, a friend named Thomas Osmer introduced Larry to a man named Ricky Lee Bryant. Larry and Ricky became friends. About 1 month before the events that would follow, Larry moved into Ricky's home. Larry Robison moved into Ricky Lee Bryant's home in Fort Worth, Texas about 1 month before August 10th, 1982. Ricky lived in a small house. Next door to Ricky's house lived Georgia and Reed, her son Scott Reed, and Georgia's mother Earlene Barker. Earlene was 55 years old and was recovering from surgery for a brain aneurysm. Bruce Gardner was Georgia's boyfriend. He did not live there, but he visited often. On the morning of August 10th, 1982, Larry Robison was inside Ricky's house. At some point, Larry went into the bathroom. Ricky Bryant was also in the bathroom. Larry pulled out a .22 caliber handgun. He had bought that gun 1 week earlier from a pawn shop. Larry shot Ricky in the head twice. After shooting him, Larry used a knife to stab Ricky many times. The medical examiner later counted 49 stab wounds and 8 cut wounds. Larry also cut off Ricky's head. He placed the severed head in the crook of Ricky's arm. Larry sexually mutilated Ricky's body. He cut off Ricky's penis and put it in the kitchen sink. Ricky's testicles were never found. After killing Ricky, Larry tried to find Ricky's car keys. He wanted to drive away. He could not find the keys, so he decided to go next door to Georgia Reed's house. He thought he could get a vehicle there. Larry walked to the house next door. He entered the house. Inside, he found Georgia and Reed in one of the bedrooms. She was 34 years old. She was not wearing any clothes. Larry shot her twice. He stabbed her multiple times. He also cut her neck very deeply. The cut severed her jugular veins and carotid arteries. She died from her wounds. In another bedroom, Larry found Georgia's son Scott. Scott was 11 years old. He would have turned 12 in 2 more days. Scott was lying on his stomach. Larry shot him once. He also hit Scott on the head with a blunt object. Then he cut and stabbed Scott multiple times. Scott died from his injuries. Under Scott's body, police later found a hammer. It appeared that the boy had picked up the hammer to try to defend his mother. In the living room, Larry found Earlene Barker. She was 55 years old and fully clothed. She was lying on the floor. Larry shot her multiple times. He stabbed her multiple times. He also cut her neck very deeply. She died in the living room. Bruce Gardner arrived at the house later. He was 33 years old. He came to pick up Georgia for a picnic date. He did not know what had happened. When he entered the house, Larry shot him several times. Larry also cut Bruce's neck. Bruce died in the living room next to Earlene Barker's body. After killing all 5 people, Larry did not leave right away. He sat in the blood and on the floor for several hours. He later said he waited for the victims to come back to life. He thought God had told him to do these things. He believed there was evil in the house, and he had to do something about it. Before leaving, Larry took items from the victims. He took rings from Georgia Reed and from Earlene Barker. He took watches from the victims, including 1 watch from Bruce Gardner. He took wallets. He took Bruce Gardner's car keys. He also removed the license plate from Ricky Bryant's car and put it on Bruce Gardner's car. He did this to hide his escape. Larry drove away in Bruce Gardner's car. He drove north toward Wichita, Kansas. On the day of the murders, he had also stopped at a Winn-Dixie store and bought 3 boxes of .22 caliber ammunition. That evening, no one yet knew what had happened inside the 2 houses. The bodies lay where they had fallen. The heads, the blood, the knives, and the gun were all still there. The only thing missing was Larry Robison. At 4:30 in the afternoon on August 10th, 1982, a woman named Junette Bryant went to her son Ricky's house in Fort Worth, Texas. She knocked on the door. Ricky did not answer. She became worried. She entered the house. Inside, she found her son's body on the floor. His head had been cut off. She ran out and called the police immediately. Police officers arrived at Ricky Bryant's house. They saw the body. They saw the severity of the wounds. While searching the property, they went into the house next door. There they found 4 more bodies: Georgia Reed, Scott Reed, Erlene Barker, and Bruce Gardner. The officers realized this was a mass murder. They called for more investigators. They collected evidence from both houses. They found a .22 caliber handgun had been used. They found knives with blood on them. They also found shell casings on the floors. The police needed to find out who had done this. They talked to neighbors and friends. They learned that Larry Robison had been living with Ricky Bryant. They also learned that Larry was no longer there. His belongings were gone. Bruce Gardner's car was also missing. The police identified Larry Robison as a suspect. Early in the morning on August 11, 1982, a police officer in Wichita, Kansas saw a car that looked suspicious. The car was backed up to a church. The officer approached the car. There was one person inside. That person was Larry Robison. The officer asked Larry to get out of the car. The officer asked for identification. Larry said he did not have any ID. He told the officer his name was Jeffrey K. Kennedy. He said the car belonged to his brother George. The officer checked the car. The registration had expired in 1980, but the license plate had a sticker for 1983. This did not match. The officer asked more questions. Larry then said he had a checkbook in the car that could serve as identification. The officer found the checkbook. The name on the checkbook was Larry Robison. The officer searched Larry's pockets. He found a woman's wedding ring. He found some bullets. He found 3 wallets. The wallets contained driver's licenses for Larry Robison, Bruce Gardner, and Ricky Lee Bryant. The officer then handcuffed Larry and placed him in the police car. The officer ran the car's vehicle identification number. The number showed that the car was registered to Bruce Gardner. Officers searched the car. Under the driver's seat, they found a loaded .22 caliber handgun. In a suitcase inside the car, they found 4 rings, more bullets, and 2 watches. The police later confirmed that the rings belonged to Georgia Reed and Erlene Barker. The watches belonged to the victims, including 1 watch from Bruce Gardner. The pawn shop manager who had sold Larry a .22 caliber handgun 1 week before the murders looked at the gun found in the car. He identified it as the same gun he had sold to Larry. The shell casings found at the murder scene were tested. All of them had been fired from that handgun. The knives found at the crime scene tested positive for blood. The blood type on 2 of the knives matched 3 of the victims. Larry Robison was arrested in Wichita, Kansas on August 11, 1982. He was brought back to Texas to face charges. In November 1982, a grand jury indicted Larry Robison for capital murder. The charge was for killing Bruce Gardner while trying to rob Erlene Barker. The state chose to try him for that specific murder because it qualified for the death penalty under Texas law. The first trial took place in 1983. Larry's lawyers argued that he was insane at the time of the murders. They presented evidence that he had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. They showed that his family had a history of mental illness. They said he did not know right from wrong when he killed the 5 people. The state argued that Larry was not insane. They said his symptoms came from drug abuse. They said he knew what he was doing because he cleaned up after himself, changed license plates, and fled to another state. The jury found Larry guilty. He was sentenced to death. In 1986, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals reversed Larry's conviction. The court found that an error had happened during jury selection. The case was sent back for a new trial. The second trial began in 1987. Larry again pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The state again presented evidence that he was in control of his actions. A friend of Larry's named Judy Smith testified about phone calls she received from Larry while he was in jail. She said Larry told her he shot Ricky Bryant in the bathroom. He said he killed the people next door because he could not find the car keys. He said he killed the young boy because he could not leave any witnesses. He He also said the police officer in Kansas was lucky he did not shoot her too. The jury in the second trial rejected the insanity defense again. On November 13, 1987, they found Larry Robison guilty of capital murder. In the punishment phase, the same jury sentenced him to death. The judge accepted that sentence. Larry spent the next 12 years on death row. His family continued to fight for his life. They filed appeals in state and federal courts. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed his conviction in 1994. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear the case in 1995. A federal court denied habeas corpus relief in 1997. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed that decision in 1998. The Supreme Court again denied review in May 1999. An execution date was set for August 17, 1999. 4.5 hours before Larry was scheduled to die, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted a stay. They ordered a hearing to determine if Larry was mentally competent to be executed. In December 1999, the court ruled that he was competent. He understood that he would be executed and why. A new execution date was set for January 21, 2000. Larry's mother Lois asked the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles to recommend clemency. She asked Governor George W. Bush to stop the execution. On January 19, 2000, the board voted unanimously to deny clemency. Governor Bush did not intervene. On January 21, 2000, Larry Keith Robison was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. He was 42 years old. He had been on death row for over 16 years. After the execution, the family members of the victims released a statement. They said justice had been done. They said Larry Robison had paid with his life for the 17 years of trauma and heartache he caused. They said they would cherish the memories of their loved ones. Rhonda Kreps, who lost her mother, her sister, and her nephew in the murders, watched Larry die. She sobbed heavily and was comforted by others. Larry's mother Lois was not present at the execution. Larry had asked her not to attend. He wanted her to remember him as he was when he was alive. The 5 victims, Ricky Lee Bryant, Georgia N. Reed, Scott Willard Reed, Erlene H. Barker, and Bruce M. Gardner, remained dead, and no punishment could bring them back. Story 3. Billy George Hughes Jr. was born on January 28, 1952. He was a white male. He grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. His family was not rich, but they provided for him. As a child, Billy did not stand out in a major way. He went to school like other children. He finished high school. After high school, he started to make bad choices. In his early 20s, Billy got married. His wife's name was Beth Rounds. They both joined a religious group called the Jehovah's Witnesses. For a time, they followed the rules of this group. But Billy had a problem. He told lies often. He also wrote bad checks. That means he wrote checks when he did not have enough money in the bank. The Jehovah's Witnesses did not accept this behavior. They expelled Billy from the group. That meant he could no longer be a member. Billy's behavior at home was also violent. He hit his wife. He slapped her. He punched her. He also choked her. One time, he choked her so hard that her mother had to step in and stop him. Beth later said that Billy was a methodical person. That means he planned things carefully. He did not act randomly. She also said he liked guns. He was a good shot. He practiced shooting. Between October 1973 and early 1975, Billy did a series of very serious things. He tried to extort money from 3 banks in Mobile, Alabama. Extortion means he tried to force the banks to give him money by making threats. Billy called local television and radio stations. He said he would blow up 2 hospitals unless the banks paid him $100,000. He also said he had kidnapped 2 small children. The FBI investigated these threats. An agent named Gene Owens led the investigation. The FBI filmed Billy at places where the money was supposed to be dropped off. Billy was caught. He was indicted for extortion. An indictment means the government formally accused him of the crime. Billy pleaded guilty. Instead of going to prison, he received probation. Probation means he was allowed to stay free, but had to follow certain rules. During the FBI investigation, Agent Owens learned more about Billy. Billy had previously threatened to kill a young child. He also beat his wife whenever she complained about his crimes. His wife later told investigators that Billy's criminal acts became worse over time. She said she believed he would keep committing violent crimes. By early 1976, Billy was still living in Alabama. He was not working a normal job. Instead, he kept stealing and lying. He wrote more bad checks. He stole credit cards. He also stole checks from other people. He used these stolen checks to buy things like clothes, a suit, boots, a cane, and even guns. He bought a shotgun and sawed off the barrel to make it shorter and easier to hide. He put the shotgun in the trunk of his car. Billy also learned how to scam travelers' checks. He would buy 10 travelers' checks for $100. Then he would cash 2 of them. Then he would report all 10 as stolen. The company would give him a refund of $100. That way, he kept the money from the 2 cashed checks and got his original money back. He did this scam more than once. In February 1976, Billy stole more guns from a car. He took a 9mm handgun in a holster, a .45 pistol in a holster, a .300 Magnum rifle with a scope, a .30 caliber carbine, and extra ammunition. He kept these weapons in his car. He also stole license plates from other cars and put them on his own car to avoid being identified. Billy traveled through many states during this time. He went to Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., Maryland, and the Carolinas. Everywhere he went, he used stolen credit cards and bad checks to pay for food, motels, and gas. He also wrote down plans. These plans included continuing his traveler's check scam, robbing a small-town bank, and setting up apartments in New Orleans, Daytona Beach, and Atlanta so he could rob banks in those cities. On March 30th, 1976, Billy left Alabama and drove to Louisiana. He used a stolen credit card there too. Then he drove to Texas. On the night of April 2nd, 1976, he stayed in Beaumont, Texas. He used the same stolen credit card to check into a motel called the Castle Motel. He continued driving west. He had many weapons in his car. He had a stolen car. He had stolen credit cards. He had written many bad checks. And he had a plan to commit more crimes. He was 24 years old. On the evening of April 4th, 1976, Billy George Hughes Jr. arrived at a Days Inn motel in Brookshire, Texas. Brookshire is west of Houston. He went to the front desk. He used a stolen credit card to pay for a room. The clerk accepted the card and gave him a key. Billy went to his room. Later, the motel clerk looked more closely at the credit card. She realized it was stolen. She went to Billy's room to confront him. That means she went to ask him about the stolen card face to face. When she entered his room, she saw a gun lying on his bed. She became scared. She left his room immediately. She went to notify the motel security guard about the problem. Billy realized the clerk knew about the stolen card. He also realized she had seen his gun. He decided to flee. He got into his car. The car was a 1975 Ford LTD. It was also stolen. He sped away from the motel. He drove onto Interstate 10 heading west. Meanwhile, the motel clerk told the security guard what happened. The security guard called the police. A dispatcher sent out a report over the police radio. The report said that a man driving a car matching a certain description had tried to use a stolen credit card at a motel. The report also gave a description of the car. 2 Texas Department of Public Safety troopers heard the dispatch. Their names were Trooper Jack Reichert and Trooper Mark Frederick. Trooper Frederick was 25 years old. He was white. He had been a trooper for 5 years. He was married and had a small child. His wife was pregnant with their second child. On this evening, Trooper Frederick was driving the patrol car. Trooper Reichert was in the passenger seat. The two troopers saw a car on Interstate 10 that matched the description from the dispatch. They began to follow Billy's car. Billy was driving west. The troopers followed him. Billy exited the highway onto an exit ramp. At that point, Trooper Frederick turned on the patrol car's overhead lights. This is the signal for a driver to pull over. Billy pulled his car to the shoulder of the exit ramp and stopped. Trooper Frederick got out of the patrol car. He walked toward the driver's side door of Billy's car. Trooper Reichert got out of the patrol car almost immediately after Frederick. Reichert started walking toward the Ford as well. He was behind Frederick. As Trooper Reichert approached, he heard a muffled gunshot. He saw Trooper Frederick grunt and lurch to the side. That means Frederick made a sound of pain, and his body jerked sideways. Frederick had been shot. Billy immediately sped away from the scene. He drove off fast. Trooper Reichert pulled out his own gun. He fired 6 shots at Billy's car as it fled. Then Reichert called for help on his radio. He went to check on Trooper Frederick. He tried to find a pulse. He could not find one. An ambulance arrived. Trooper Frederick was declared dead inside the ambulance on the way to Sealy Medical Center. The bullet had struck him on the upper left arm. It exited the inside of his arm. Then it entered his chest on the left side. It struck his aorta and his heart. That caused heavy bleeding inside his body. He died from shock and blood loss. Other troopers heard the radio calls about the shooting. 2 troopers named Randall Beisch and Rodney Green were driving toward the scene. About 3 miles from where the shooting happened, they saw a car parked and abandoned. It was Billy's Ford. The car had several bullet holes in it from Trooper Reichert's shots. Inside the car, the troopers found a holster for a handgun and a room key from the days in motel in Brookshire. The police then started a massive manhunt. That means a very large search for the suspect. As many as 500 law enforcement officers joined the search. They looked for Billy across the area. 2.5 days later, on April 6, 1976, a report came in. Someone had seen a possible suspect about 6 miles south of Sealy, Texas. A Texas Ranger named Ray Skolton was in charge of the investigation. He got into a helicopter and flew to that location. From the air, he spotted Billy hiding under a mesquite tree in a pasture. A mesquite tree is a small tree that grows in Texas. The helicopter hovered a few feet above the ground. Billy pointed a gun at the helicopter. Ranger Skolton pointed his own gun out of the helicopter window at Billy. When Billy saw the ranger's gun, he dropped his weapon. He was then taken into custody. That means he was arrested. When the police searched Billy, they found a 9mm handgun on him. The gun was loaded with 13 or 14 rounds. Later, a ballistics expert tested the bullet that killed Trooper Frederick. The expert's name was Ronald Richardson. He worked at the DPS Scientific Crime Laboratory. He determined that the bullet had been fired from the 9mm handgun taken from Billy. The police also searched Billy's car more thoroughly. In the trunk, they found a fully loaded .30 caliber carbine, a sawed-off short-barrel 12-gauge shotgun, a .300 Magnum rifle, extra shotgun ammunition, and a Halloween mask. They also found a holster for a revolver in the glove compartment. After he was arrested, Billy admitted to some things. He admitted the car was stolen. He admitted the credit card was stolen. He admitted he had committed many other thefts and robberies. But he told a different story about the shooting. He claimed that when the troopers pulled him over, they opened fire on him first. He said he was not the one who started the shooting. He said he fired one blind shot out his window without aiming. He said that blind shot accidentally killed Trooper Frederick. At the time of his arrest, Billy was 24 years old. He was charged with capital murder. Capital murder means killing a peace officer who was doing his official job. That is a crime that can carry the death penalty. After Billy Hughes was arrested on April 6, 1976, he was taken to jail. A grand jury in Austin County, Texas, formally charged him with capital murder. The case was moved to a different county for trial. That county was Matagorda County, Texas. The change of location was done to make sure the jury would be fair. Billy pleaded not guilty. That meant he told the court he did not commit the crime as charged. The first trial took place in September 1976. The jury heard all the evidence. They heard from the motel clerk. They heard from Trooper Reichert. They heard from the ballistics expert. They also heard Billy's version of the story. He said the troopers shot first. The jury did not believe him. On September 16, 1976, the jury found Billy guilty of capital murder. Then the same jury had a second hearing to decide his punishment. They sentenced him to death. After a death sentence in Texas, the case is automatically appealed. That means a higher court reviews the case without the defendant having to ask. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals looked at Billy's case. At first, the court agreed with the conviction. But later, Billy asked for post-conviction relief. That means he asked the court to look for mistakes. On March 18, 1987, the court found a mistake. One potential juror had been improperly excluded from the first trial. That meant the jury was not chosen correctly. The court reversed Billy's conviction. That means they threw out the guilty verdict and the death sentence. He would have to be tried again. Billy was retried in June 1988. The trial took place again in Matagorda County. The prosecutors presented the same evidence again. Billy again claimed the troopers shot first. On June 9, 1988, the second jury found him guilty of capital murder. They again sentenced him to death. This time, the jury took only 47 minutes to decide on the death sentence. The second conviction was automatically appealed to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. On April 13, 1994, that court affirmed the conviction. That means they agreed it was correct. Billy then asked the United States Supreme Court to review his case. On May 15, 1995, the Supreme Court refused to hear it. The death sentence stayed in place. Billy then filed more legal requests. He asked for state habeas corpus relief. Habeas corpus is a way for a prisoner to challenge whether he is being held lawfully. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied his request on February 26, 1997. He then asked the U.S. Supreme Court again. On October 14, 1997, the Supreme Court again refused to hear his case. The trial court set an execution date for September 19, 1997. Billy filed more petitions in federal court to stop it. The federal district court denied his request on January 15, 1998. He appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. On October 5, 1999, the Fifth Circuit also denied his request. He asked the U.S. Supreme Court one more time. The court did not stop the execution. On January 24, 2000, Billy George Hughes Jr. was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas. He was 47 years old. He had been on death row for 24 years. That was one of the longest stays on Texas death row at that time. Before he died, he gave a final statement. He said he loved his family and friends. He told other death row prisoners not to give up. He again said he was innocent. He said the truth would come out someday. He said he was not the same person he was 24 years ago. Then the warden gave the signal. The lethal drugs were injected. He was pronounced dead at 6:18 p.m. Trooper Mark Frederick's mother, Patsy Tier, spoke after the execution. She said her family could finally move on. She said Mark could now rest in peace. She said she hoped no other family would have to go through what her family went through. The Frederick family had waited 24 years for justice. While on death row, Billy had earned 2 college degrees in religion. He had drawn cartoons. He had run a greeting card business from his cell. He had translated books into Braille for blind people. He had also worked as a registered lobbyist against the death penalty. But none of that changed the fact that a jury had found him guilty of killing a police officer. The state of Texas carried out the sentence. The case was closed. Story 4. Glenn Charles McGinnis was born on January 11, 1973, in Houston, Texas. He was a black male. His mother and father were not married, and his father did not live with them. Glenn had little contact with his natural father while growing up. Glenn lived with his mother in a small 1-bedroom apartment in Houston. His mother worked as a prostitute to make money. She also became addicted to crack cocaine. Glenn remembered her using drugs starting when he was about 8 or 9 years old. His mother spent several periods in jail because she was caught with drugs. When Glenn was young, his mother had a boyfriend who became his stepfather. This man lived in the apartment with them for about 2 years. The stepfather was violent. He beat Glenn with an electric cord. When Glenn was about 9 or 10 years old, his stepfather raped him. Another time, the stepfather hit Glenn on the head with a baseball bat. On a different occasion, Glenn's mother and stepfather burned his stomach with hot sausage grease. The State Child Protective Services, or CPS, came to help Glenn 3 separate times. Each time, they took Glenn to get medical treatment for his injuries. But each time, they sent him back to live with his mother. Glenn did not want to stay there. He ran away from home. When he ran away, he was caught stealing from shops. The police sent him back home again. When Glenn was 11 years old, he left home for good. He did not go back. He lived on the streets of Houston. He slept in cars and in empty apartments. Sometimes he stayed with adult friends. He did not go to school anymore. He continued to steal clothes and food from shops to survive. Because Glenn was stealing cars and doing other small crimes, the state sent him to juvenile detention facilities. These were locked places for young offenders. He went in and out of these facilities for several years. On July 30th, 1986, when Glenn was 13 years old, a court found him guilty of criminal trespass. He was placed on juvenile probation, but he broke the rules of his probation. On April 16th, 1987, the court changed his probation conditions. Then on September 3rd, 1987, the court revoked his probation completely because he was found guilty of burglary of a vehicle. The court sent him to the Texas Youth Commission. He was placed at Gainesville State School, which was a secure facility for young people. Glenn was paroled or released early with supervision on January 22, 1988. But he did not stay out of trouble for long. On August 28, 1988, a woman named Carol Spate had her van stolen at gunpoint in Houston. Glenn was not identified as the gunman, but on September 4, 1988, he was seen driving that same van. He got into a minor car accident. At the accident scene, he showed a credit card with Carol Spate's name on it and said it was his mother's card. On September 7, 1988, police found the van in Missouri City, Texas, with Glenn driving it. He again showed credit cards with Spate's name. He was charged with felony theft and misdemeanor assault. His parole was revoked, and he was sent back to Gainesville State School. Glenn was paroled again on March 28, 1989. But on April 15, 1989, he was caught driving a stolen car in Houston. The car's steering column was broken, and there were no keys. Police found needle-nosed pliers on the floor, which had been used to start the car. He was charged with unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, which is a felony. On April 26, 1989, his parole was revoked again. He was sent to Crockett State School, another juvenile facility. He was released from Crockett State School in February 1990. After his release, Glenn went to Conroe, Texas, which is a small town about 45 miles north of Houston. On May 3, 1990, a woman named Tara Applegate left her car unlocked outside a store in Conroe. When she came back and started the car, she turned around and saw Glenn crouched on the floor in the back seat. She tried to get out, but he put the car in reverse. She fell under the car, and he ran over her foot before driving away. Glenn pleaded guilty to stealing her car. On July 27, 1990, a judge gave him deferred adjudication, which is a form of probation. He was told to report immediately to the Montgomery County Probation Department. He never reported. He went to stay with his aunt, Annette McGinnis, in her apartment at Williams Square Apartments in Conroe. The apartment was just 2 blocks from a dry cleaning store called Wilkins Dry Cleaners. On the morning of August 1, 1990, Glenn McGinnis was staying at his aunt Annette McGinnis's apartment at Williams Square Apartments in Conroe, Texas. He had been living there since July 27th, just 5 days earlier. He had not reported to his probation officer, as he was required to do. At some point that day, Glenn decided to rob a store. He wanted money. A neighbor may have encouraged him to do this, but the main reason was that he needed cash. He thought about robbing Wilkins Dry Cleaners, which was located just 2 blocks from his aunt's apartment. The store was at a strip shopping center in Conroe. Glenn went to the dry cleaners at least once that afternoon, but left without doing anything. He hesitated. He then returned to his aunt's apartment. While there, he took his aunt's .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol. It was a Raven brand handgun. His aunt owned the gun, but she did not know he took it. He took the gun because he wanted to scare the person working at the cleaners. He also gathered some clothing items, including a pair of jeans that belonged to his aunt. He put the jeans in a bag. He planned to pretend he was a customer dropping off laundry so that no one would suspect him. Glenn walked back to Wilkins Dry Cleaners. He carried the hidden gun and the bag of jeans. When he entered the store, the clerk on duty was Lita and Wilkerson. She was a 30-year-old white female. She was married and had 2 young daughters. She worked at the cleaners as a clerk. She was alone in the store at that time. Glenn approached the counter. He demanded money. Lita Wilkerson told him that she did not have the key to open the cash register. Glenn became panicked and hysterical, according to what he later said. He wanted to prove that his gun was real and to scare her into giving him money. He fired the gun. He shot Lita Wilkerson once in the face. He then shot her 3 times in the back. She fell to the floor face up. Her eyes remained open. Her body was covered in blood. She was still alive for a short time, but died soon after. The telephone on the front counter was left off the hook. Objects on the counter were knocked over or in disarray. After shooting her, Glenn opened the cash register. He took approximately $140 in cash. He also left behind the bag of jeans on the front counter. The jeans had the name McGinnis written in the pockets. This was because his aunt had written her name in them. He did not take the jeans with him. Glenn then looked for a way to leave. He saw Lita Wilkerson's vehicle outside the store. It was a 1985 silver gray GMC minivan. He took the keys, which he later kept, and drove away in the van. He left the dry cleaners with the money and the van. Later that afternoon, a customer named Homer Burson walked into Wilkins Dry Cleaners to pick up some cleaning. He waited at the counter, but no one came to help him. He left the store. Then he came back inside with another customer. He noticed that the cash register was open. He walked around the corner of the counter toward the back room. There he discovered Lita Wilkerson lying on the floor, face up, covered in blood. He immediately called the police and asked for an ambulance. The police arrived, and Lita Wilkerson was taken to a nearby hospital. She was pronounced dead on arrival. When police officers searched the crime scene, they found spent .25 caliber bullets and bullet casings on the floor near the body. They saw blood on the front counter next to the pile of jeans with the name McGinnis written in the pockets. They noted that the cash register was missing about $140. They also learned that the victim's minivan was not in the parking lot. Glenn drove the stolen van to a nearby shopping center. He parked it in the lot and left it there. Between the two front seats of the van, he left Lita Wilkerson's wallet. He did not realize that his fingerprint would be on the wallet. He then tried to leave the area. However, the van had broken down earlier in the day, which is why he left it there. 3 employees from businesses in that shopping center saw him that afternoon. He asked them for assistance because his van had broken down. They later remembered his face. That same day, 2 different witnesses picked Glenn out of a photographic lineup. They identified him as the man they had seen at or near Wilkins' dry cleaners around the time of the murder. Glenn then went back to his aunt's apartment at Williams Square Apartments. He had $105 of the stolen money in his possession. He hid the .25 caliber gun in a laundry hamper inside a hall closet in the apartment. He also kept the set of keys he had taken from Lita Wilkerson. Late in the evening of August 1st, 1990, police officers found Lita Wilkerson's silver gray GMC minivan. It was abandoned in the parking lot of a nearby shopping center. Officers searched the inside of the van. Between the 2 front seats, they found Lita Wilkerson's wallet. A crime scene investigator lifted a fingerprint from the wallet. That fingerprint belonged to Glenn McGinnis. The next morning, on August 2nd, 1990, police showed photographs to 3 employees who worked at businesses in the same shopping center where the van was found. Each of the 3 employees picked Glenn McGinnis out of the photographic lineup. They told police he was the man who had asked for help because his van had broken down the day before. Police learned that Glenn McGinnis was staying at his aunt's apartment at Williams Square Apartments. The apartment was located only 2 blocks from Wilkins' dry cleaners. Early on the morning of August 2nd, 1990, police went to that address. They arrested Glenn McGinnis for capital murder. They took him to the police station. When officers searched him, they found $105 in his possession. That money was part of the $140 taken from the cash register. Later that same morning, police returned to Annette McGinnis's apartment. They asked her for permission to search for a .25 caliber weapon. Annette McGinnis told police that she owned a .25 caliber Raven semi-automatic pistol. She said her nephew Glenn had been living with her since July 27, 1990. She said she had noticed the gun was not where she usually kept it. She agreed to let police search the apartment. Officers searched the apartment. They found the .25 caliber Raven semi-automatic pistol inside a laundry hamper located in a hall closet. Annette McGinnis identified the gun as her own. She said she did not know how it got into the laundry hamper. A firearms examiner named Russell Johnson later tested the gun. He testified at trial that the shell casings found on the floor of the dry cleaners and the bullets taken from the victim's body and from the crime scene had all been fired from Annette McGinnis's gun. Almost 2 months after the murder, Annette McGinnis contacted the police. She told them she had found a set of keys inside her apartment. She turned the keys over to the authorities. The keys were identified as belonging to Lita Wilkerson. On October 8, 1990, a grand jury indicted Glenn McGinnis in Montgomery County, Texas. He was charged with capital murder. The charge said he killed Lita Wilkerson while robbing her or trying to rob her. Glenn pleaded not guilty. His trial began in July 1992. The jury pool had 102 people. 3 of them were African American. The rest were white. All 3 African American potential jurors asked to be excused. 2 gave medical reasons. 1 said she was going on vacation. The judge excused all 3. Glenn's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. The final jury that heard the case was all white. During the trial, the prosecutor showed evidence of Glenn's fingerprint on the victim's wallet. He showed that the gun found in the apartment was the murder weapon. He showed that Glenn had $105 of the stolen money. He showed that witnesses identified Glenn near the scene and with the broken-down van. The prosecutor also presented evidence of Glenn's past crimes, including the stolen van from Carol Spate and the car theft from Tara Applegate. The judge allowed the jury to hear about the incident where a woman had her van stolen at gunpoint in 1988, even though Glenn had never been identified as the gunman in that case. Glenn's defense lawyer presented evidence about his difficult childhood. For employees from the juvenile detention facility where Glenn had been held testified. They said Glenn had a good disciplinary record. They said he was polite and respectful to staff. They said he was not violent or aggressive, even when other juveniles taunted him for being homosexual. One staff member said she had considered adopting him. A psychologist testified that Glenn was impulsive and a product of his environment. The psychologist said Glenn was not likely to be a continuing threat to society if kept in a structured prison setting. The judge did not allow the jury to hear Glenn's own statement that he had panicked and only meant to scare the victim. On July 23, 1992, the jury found Glenn McGinnis guilty of capital murder. The trial then moved to the punishment phase. The jury had to decide if Glenn had acted deliberately, if he would be a continuing threat to society, and if there were any mitigating factors. The prosecutor argued that Glenn was bad to the bone and had rejected every chance to go straight. The jury answered yes to the questions and found no reason for leniency. On July 30, 1992, the trial court sentenced Glenn McGinnis to death. Glenn appealed his conviction and sentence. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed the sentence on December 14, 1994. He asked for a rehearing, but it was denied on March 1, 1995. He then asked the United States Supreme Court to hear his case, but the court denied his request on October 2, 1995. He filed a state habeas corpus petition, which was denied on August 28, 1996. He filed a federal habeas corpus petition, but a federal district court denied it on February 2, 1998. The United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit also denied relief on July 20, 1999. The U.S. Supreme Court denied his final request on January 18, 2000. On January 25, 2000, Glenn Charles McGinnis was executed by lethal injection at the state prison in Huntsville, Texas. He gave no final statement. He was pronounced dead at 6:17 p.m. He was 27 years old. Lita Ann Wilkerson's husband and one of her daughters witnessed the execution. Afterward, her husband said that justice had been served. The final sentence of this story is that Glenn Charles McGinnis, who killed Lita Wilkerson when he was 17 years old, was executed 9.5 years later, and Lita's family continued to miss her every day. Story 5. James Walter Moreland was born on May 15, 1960. He was a white male. He grew up in the state of Indiana. His family did not stay in one place for very long. They moved from town to town. Because of this, James did not have a steady or calm childhood. When James was a teenager, he started drinking alcohol. He drank beer most of all. He found that drinking made him feel different. But it also got him into trouble. He later said that every time he had a problem with the police, he had been drinking alcohol first. He did not think he had a problem with drugs or alcohol, but he did attend a drug abuse center in Florida for 1 month. He quit after that month was over. At the age of 17, James committed 2 burglaries in the state of Texas. He broke into 2 different homes and took things that did not belong to him. The police caught him. He made a deal on one of the burglary charges. He pleaded out of that charge. On the other burglary charge, he was given felony probation. That meant he did not go to prison, but he had to follow strict rules for 5 years. But James did not follow the rules. Within 1 week of being placed on probation for the Texas burglary, he left Texas and went to Florida. In Florida, he broke into a Texaco gas station. He stole a truck as well. The police in Florida caught him for this crime. He was given probation again, this time for 5 years in Florida. James also committed several smaller crimes in Indiana in 1977 and 1978. These were misdemeanors. They included drinking alcohol when he was underage, having alcohol when he was not supposed to, being drunk in public, and resisting arrest. Each time, he was caught and punished. But each time, he did not stop drinking. James did not have a steady job. He moved between Indiana, Texas, and Florida. He did not have a wife or children. He lived with family members sometimes, and other times he was on his own. His habit was to drink beer during the day. He would start in the afternoon and keep going into the evening. When he drank, he made poor choices. He would hitchhike to get from place to place because he did not own a car. He did not plan for the future. He lived day by day. By the time James was 22 years old, he had already been in trouble with the law in 3 different states. He had been given probation twice. He had committed multiple misdemeanors. He had not held a steady job. He drank beer almost every day. He did not think he had a problem, but the pattern was clear. Every time he drank, something bad happened. On October 9th, 1982, James Walter Moreland was 22 years old. He was at his home in Texas. He was drinking beer with his brother. He had already drunk 6 to 8 beers by the late afternoon. He decided he wanted to drink more. So he left his home and started hitchhiking into town. Around 5 or 6 in the evening, a car stopped to pick him up. The car was old. Inside were 2 men. The driver was John Royce Cravey. He was 41 years old. He worked as an iron worker. He was not in good health and was physically weak. The other man was Clinton Corbett Abbott. He was 53 years old. He was a retired soldier. Both men had been drinking beer. They had a 12-pack of Old Milwaukee beer with them. James got into the car. All 3 men continued to drink beer as they drove. James thought both men were okay. He thought they were just having a good time. The men invited James to come back to Cravey's trailer home. James said yes. They arrived at the trailer in Eustis, Texas. The 3 men went inside. They went into the living room. They kept drinking beer for about another hour and a half. At some point, Abbott left the living room and went into the back bedroom. James was left alone in the living room with Cravey. According to James, Cravey then began to act in a romantic way toward him. James said Cravey put his hand on James's leg and rubbed it. James said he got up from the couch to leave, but Cravey grabbed the back of James's pants. He pulled the pants down about halfway. This caused James to fall to the floor. James stood up and pulled his pants back up. Cravey followed him into the kitchen. James said Cravey continued to come after him. James saw a knife on the kitchen table. He picked up that knife. He said Cravey hit him on the top of the head with something. Then Cravey raised his arm to hit James a second time. James said he thought it was either him or Cravey. He thought Cravey was going to rape him or hurt him. So James stabbed Cravey with the knife. James did not remember how many times he stabbed Cravey, but later, medical examination would show that Cravey was stabbed 7 times. All 7 stab wounds were in a small area on the upper middle part of his back. The wounds went into his lungs. This caused his death. There was also 1 shallow cut on the back of Cravey's right hand. That was a defensive wound. There was also 1 superficial stab wound to Cravey's front left shoulder. That could have happened face to face. After stabbing Cravey, James said he wanted to get out of the trailer. He started walking toward the doorway. Then Clinton Abbott came out of the back bedroom. Abbott yelled at James. James said he panicked. He ran up to Abbott and stabbed him in the doorway of the bedroom. Later examination would show that Abbott was also stabbed 7 times. Like Cravey, all 7 stab wounds were in a small area on the upper middle part of his back. The pattern was almost the same as Cravey's wounds. The wounds went into his lungs. This caused his death. There were also shallow cuts on the back of Abbott's right hand. Those were defensive wounds. The way the back wounds were placed showed that both victims were lying on their stomachs when they were stabbed. They were likely sleeping on a bed or a couch. The person who stabbed them was standing over them. Neither victim had moved or struggled much. The trailer showed no signs of a fight. The furniture was not knocked over. Nothing was broken. After stabbing both men, James went back to where Cravey was lying. He took money out of Cravey's billfold. He said he took the money so he could get out of the area. He also took car keys from the floor of the trailer. He tried to leave in Abbott's car, which was a brown Pinto parked outside, but the car became disabled. It got stuck on a steel rod in a neighbor's yard. So James got out of the car and ran away. He left the 2 bloody knives on top of a dresser in the hallway. The knives were kitchen knives. They had blood on them. James went into the woods and stayed there all night. The next morning, he went into Dallas. He bought a bus ticket. He took the bus to Bedford, Indiana. When he arrived in Indiana, his father told him that both men were dead. James said he did not know before that moment that he had killed them. He was wearing a pair of boots that he said Cravey had given him. Back in Eustis, Texas, the bodies were found at around 11 p.m. on October 9th, 1982. Cravey's ex-wife, her son, and a neighbor discovered them. They found Cravey's body on the floor next to a blood-stained couch in the front room. They found Abbott's body on the floor next to a bed in the back bedroom. Cravey's wallet was empty and lying on a small table, but $16 was still found in the front pocket of his pants. Abbott's car keys were found in the grass beside his car. The trailer had no signs of a struggle. The 2 bloody knives were on the dresser. Before the bodies were found, around 8 p.m. that same evening, someone had seen a man trying to leave in Abbott's car. That man was James Moreland. The car got stuck and the man ran away. After the bodies were found on the night of October 9th, 1982, the Henderson County Sheriff's Department sent investigators to the trailer. The investigators looked at everything. They wrote down what they saw. They took photographs. They collected the 2 bloody knives from the dresser. They also noted that Cravey's wallet was empty on a small table. The investigators talked to Cravey's ex-wife. She lived across the street. She told them she had last seen the 2 victims alive around noon on the day they were killed. She also told them about the man she saw trying to leave in Abbott's brown Pinto around 8 p.m. that evening. The car got stuck on a steel rod in a neighbor's yard, and the man ran away. The investigators now had a description of a suspect. On October 11th, 1982, 2 days after the murders, a man named David Osborne came forward. David Osborne was James Moreland's cousin. He gave information to the authorities about James. He told them where James might be and what James had done. Based on this information from the cousin, the authorities obtained 2 arrest warrants for James Walter Moreland on October 12, 1982. The warrants were issued in Henderson County, Texas. The police now had legal permission to arrest James. On October 13, 1982, local police arrested James Moreland in Bedford, Indiana. He was taken into custody without a fight. After the arrest, the police in Bedford searched the apartment of Barbara Brown. Barbara Brown was James's sister. In a trash can at her apartment, the police found cut-up pieces of boots. These boots were later identified as belonging to John Cravey. James had cut them up and thrown them away. The police also talked to James's father. James's father gave them a medicine bottle. On the bottle's label was the name Cravey Joe. This was another piece of evidence linking James to the victims. After his arrest, James verbally confessed to the Bedford police. He then agreed to give a written confession. In that written confession, he explained what happened. He said he had been drinking. He said the 2 men picked him up. He said he went to the trailer. He said Cravey made advances and grabbed his pants. He said he stabbed Cravey. Then he said he stabbed Abbott when Abbott yelled at him. He also admitted taking money from Cravey's billfold and taking the car keys. He said he ran away because he was scared. The police in Texas came to Indiana. They took James back to Texas to stand trial. He was indicted for the capital murder of Clinton Abbott on December 1st, 1982. He was also indicted for Cravey's killing, but he was never tried for that crime. The trial took place in the 173rd District Court of Henderson County, Texas. James pleaded not guilty. The trial began in 1983. The jury heard from many witnesses. The state brought in the Dallas County Chief Medical Examiner. The medical examiner testified about the blood alcohol levels of the victims. Abbott had a level of 0.24. Cravey had a level of 0.19. The medical examiner said both men had likely stopped drinking and fallen asleep 1.5 to 2.5 hours before they died. The medical examiner also testified about the stab wounds. He said each man had 7 stab wounds in a small area on the upper middle part of their backs. The pattern was so similar that the two victims were almost confusing. He said the wounds showed that neither victim struggled. Both were lying on their stomachs, likely sleeping, when they were stabbed by someone standing over them. The knife went into their lungs, which caused their deaths. The shallow cuts on the backs of their hands were defensive wounds, but they showed only a weak attempt to fight back. The state also brought witnesses who knew John Cravey. These witnesses testified that Cravey never showed homosexual tendencies. He never made homosexual advances toward anyone. They also said Cravey was in poor health and was physically weak. The police chief of Eustis, James Cook, testified that Cravey had been arrested for public intoxication and disorderly conduct, but he was never violent. He was easy to handle even when drunk. James testified at his trial. He told the jury most of what he had said in his confession, but he changed some details. He now said that after he stabbed Cravey, Abbott ran out of the back bedroom all the way down the hallway. He said they met at the entrance of the living room and started fighting. He said Abbott had him by the neck. They wrestled down the hallway and fell on the bed. He could not remember how many times he stabbed Abbott. He also said the money he took was lying on the floor, not taken from the billfold. The state used his written confession to show that he was changing his story. On June 15, 1983, the jury found James Walter Moreland guilty of capital murder for the death of Clinton Abbott. Because it was a capital murder conviction, Texas law required the judge to sentence him to death. The judge gave that sentence. After the trial, James appealed his conviction and sentence. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed, or upheld, the conviction and sentence on January 13, 1993. James then asked the United States Supreme Court to review his case. The Supreme Court said no on June 14, 1993. James then filed a petition for habeas corpus. That is a legal way to challenge a prison sentence. He filed in federal district court on August 26, 1993. The court dismissed his petition because he had not finished all his state appeals first. He then filed a habeas petition in state court on March 22, 1996. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied him relief on July 12, 1996. He filed another federal habeas petition on November 12, 1996. The federal district court denied it on December 11, 1997. He appealed to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. On May 10, 1999, the Fifth Circuit denied his appeal. He asked the U.S. Supreme Court again. The Supreme Court said no on October 12, 1999, and again on November 29, 1999. James also asked for clemency. Clemency is mercy from the governor. Governor George W. Bush did not grant clemency. On January 27, 2000, James Walter Moreland was executed by lethal injection in Texas. He was 39 years old. He gave a final statement. He apologized to the families of his victims. He said his life was all he could give because he stole 2 lives. He said alcohol was what led him to do it. He sang words as the drugs were given to him. He was pronounced dead at 6:21 p.m. Clinton Abbott and John Cravey remained dead. Their families had waited over 17 years to see justice done. James Moreland's execution was the 206th in Texas since 1976 and the 610th in the United States since 1977. The story of James Walter Moreland ends with his death by lethal injection on January 27, 2000. Story 6. Michael Donald Roberts was born on August 11, 1957. He was born in the United States. His exact place of birth is not recorded in public records, but he later lived in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Michael did not know his real father. His biological father was not part of his life from the beginning. When Michael was young, he was adopted by another family. His adoptive father was a man who took care of him. But this adoptive father died early, when Michael was still a child. After the adoptive father died, Michael's mother found a new partner. This man became Michael's stepfather. The stepfather was not kind to Michael. He was abusive. He treated Michael badly. The abuse was serious enough that Michael could not stay at home. When Michael was 11 years old, the situation with his stepfather became so bad that Michael left his home. He was only a child. He had no parents to protect him. He had no place to live. He was forced to take care of himself on the streets. From the age of 11, Michael lived on his own. He did not have a stable home. He did not have adults guiding him. He had to find food and shelter by himself. He grew up in the streets of Oklahoma City. He did not have a normal childhood with school, friends, or family support. As a teenager and young adult, Michael did not have steady jobs. He did not finish much education. He moved through life without a permanent address. He was a black male living in a city where he had few opportunities. He did not build lasting relationships with people who could help him. By the time Michael was in his late 20s, he had developed a pattern of behavior. He did not follow the law. He committed small crimes to survive. He did not trust authority figures like police officers. He had learned from a young age that he could only rely on himself. Michael lived in a neighborhood in northwest Oklahoma City. He lived on a street where many elderly people also lived. His house was 3 houses down from an older woman named Lula Mae Brooks. He knew her as a neighbor. He had seen her for years. But at this point in his life, he had not done anything to her. Michael had a criminal record by the time he turned 30. He had been in trouble with the law before. He had committed burglaries and other property crimes. But he had not been convicted of murder. He had not been sent to death row. That part of his life was still ahead of him. In late 1987, Michael was 30 years old. He was still living in the same neighborhood. He was still committing crimes. He would watch people, especially older people, to find chances to break into their homes. He worked with a juvenile, a young person who was also breaking the law. Together they would follow senior citizens home from stores and then rob them at night. Michael's life up to this point had been hard. He had no father. His adoptive father died. His stepfather was cruel. He was homeless at 11. He grew up on the streets. He had no education. He had no steady job. He had no one to teach him right from wrong. He survived by stealing. And by the start of 1988, he was still living that same life, 3 houses away from an 80-year-old woman named Lula Mae Brooks. On January 16, 1988, Michael Donald Roberts was 30 years old. He was living 3 houses down from Lula Mae Brooks on the same street in northwest Oklahoma City. Lula Mae Brooks was 80 years old. She was a white female. She lived alone in her home. On that day, Roberts saw that the front door of Brooks' house was open. He decided to enter the house. His plan was to burglarize the home. He wanted to steal things he could take or sell. He did not have permission to be inside her house. When Roberts entered, Brooks was inside. According to what Roberts later told police, Brooks came toward him. Roberts said she was holding a knife. Roberts claimed that Brooks said she had been robbed before and did not want it to happen again. Then Roberts said she charged at him with the knife. Roberts had his own knife with him. He grabbed the hand in which Brooks was holding her knife. At the same time, he took his own knife and stabbed Brooks in the neck. Blood came out of the wound. Roberts then helped Brooks to the bathroom. He said he wanted to attend to her wound. After that, Roberts went back to the living room. He saw 2 purses. He was still focused on stealing. At some point, Brooks came up behind Roberts. Roberts then threw her down on the floor. He put a covering over her head. Then he used another knife to slit her throat. Roberts later told police that Brooks asked him to finish the job after he threw her on the floor. Police and prosecutors later said this was not possible. They said Brooks had lost too much blood by that point to speak. They believed Roberts killed her because she could identify him, not because she asked him to. The method of murder was stabbing and slitting the throat. Roberts stabbed Brooks in the head and neck. He then cut her throat with a knife. The wounds caused Brooks to drown in her own blood. She died on the living room floor of her own home. Roberts did not act alone in the pattern of crimes leading up to this day. In the months before January 16, 1988, Roberts and a juvenile had been robbing homes in the same neighborhood. They targeted elderly people. They would watch senior citizens shopping. Then they would follow them home. At night, they would break in and rob them. On the day of the murder, Roberts entered Brooks' home with the intent to steal. The burglary and the murder happened together. After killing Brooks, Roberts left the house. He did not call for help. He did not tell anyone what he had done. Later, when police questioned him, Roberts gave 3 different versions of what happened. The first version he gave was that he entered the house the day after the murder. He said he saw disarray inside and a chalk outline of a body, but police had not used a chalk outline in this case. This version was false. The second version he gave was that he was walking to the store on January 16, 1988. He said he heard a noise inside Brooks' house. He entered and saw her lying on the floor with blood coming from her throat. He said he got scared and ran out. He said he worried that some blood might have gotten on his jeans. The third version he gave was the one described above. He admitted that he decided to burglarize Brooks. He admitted that he entered through the open door. He admitted that he stabbed her and later slit her throat. During the same interviews with police, Roberts also admitted to committing 19 other burglaries. He also confessed to 1 count of sexual assault. These crimes happened in the same area around the same time period. A knife was found at the scene of Brooks' murder. Another knife was taken from Roberts' person when he was arrested. Blood was found on Roberts' knife and on his shoes. The pattern on the bottom of his shoes matched shoe prints found at the murder scene. The shoe prints showed a diamond pattern consistent with an athletic-type shoe. Roberts lived 3 houses down from Brooks. He had known her as a neighbor for years. He chose to enter her home because the door was open. He used a knife to stab her. He used another knife to slit her throat. She died on her living room floor. After the crime, Roberts went back to his own life, 3 houses away, until the police came to question him. The body of Lula Mae Brooks was found on January 16, 1988, on her living room floor. Someone who knew her, or a neighbor, likely called the police. When officers arrived, they saw signs of forced entry into the house. They found a knife at the scene. They also photographed shoe prints on the floor. The shoe prints had a diamond pattern that looked like it came from an athletic shoe. The police began asking questions in the neighborhood. Around the same time, they arrested a juvenile who was suspected of several burglaries in the same area. That juvenile told the police that Michael Donald Roberts had been involved in property crimes with him. The juvenile gave Roberts' name to the detectives. After getting this information, the police looked for Roberts. They found him as a passenger in a car during a routine traffic stop. The officers ran a computer check on Roberts. The check showed that Roberts had outstanding traffic warrants. The police arrested him for those warrants. During the arrest, the officers took a knife from Roberts' person. While they were driving him to jail, Roberts spoke without being asked. He said he knew the victim. He said she was his neighbor, and he had known her for years. The officer did not ask him any questions about the murder at that time. Roberts offered this information on his own. At the jail, during the booking process, the officers took Roberts' athletic shoes. They sent the shoes, the shoelaces, the knife taken from Roberts, blood samples from Roberts, and blood type information from the victim to a forensic lab. The tests showed that Roberts' knife had blood on it. His shoes also had blood on them. The lab could not determine more details about the blood, but the pattern on the bottom of Roberts' shoes matched the diamond pattern found at the murder scene. Detectives then interviewed Roberts. They recorded the interviews on video without telling Roberts the camera was on. During these interviews, Roberts first gave a false version of events. He said he entered the house the day after the murder. Then he gave a second false version. He said he found Brooks already dying. Finally, he gave the third version in which he admitted to stabbing her and slitting her throat. Roberts signed a confession. In that confession, he also admitted to 19 other burglaries and 1 sexual assault. The police used this confession as key evidence. At his trial, which started in 1988, Roberts changed his story. He recanted his confession. He told the jury that he only confessed because the detectives offered him a deal. He said they promised him a 15-year sentence to clear up the murder and the robberies. The detectives denied this claim. They said they never made such an offer. The prosecution argued that Roberts killed Brooks because Brooks could identify him. They said she had seen his face during the burglary. The prosecution also pointed out that no physical evidence directly linked Roberts to the crime besides the blood on his knife and shoes, which could not be fully matched. But they had his confession. They had the matching shoe prints. They had the knife. They had his volunteered knowledge of the victim. The jury found Roberts guilty of first-degree murder and first-degree burglary. Because Roberts had prior felony convictions involving violence or threat of violence, the jury also found 3 aggravating circumstances. First, Roberts committed the murder to avoid arrest and prosecution. Second, he had been previously convicted of a felony involving the use or threat of violence. Third, there was a probability that Roberts would commit more violent crimes in the future, making him a continuing threat to society. The jury recommended the death penalty for the murder. For the burglary, they recommended 350 years in prison. The trial judge sentenced Roberts to death. Roberts appealed his case. In 1994, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed his conviction and sentence. The case is cited as Roberts v. State, 868 P.2D 712. Roberts then appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court denied his request to hear the case in 1994. Roberts filed more appeals. In 1996, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals denied his request for post-conviction relief in Roberts v. State, 910 P.2D 1071. He continued to fight his sentence through the federal courts. The 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals also denied his requests. In January 2000, Roberts asked the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board for clemency. His attorney argued that his confession was coerced and that physical evidence from the trial had been lost, so it could not be tested for DNA. The board voted 3-1 against recommending clemency. Only one member, Susan Bussey, voted in favor. Governor Frank Keating was asked to grant a 60-day reprieve so a study of the death penalty could be done. The governor declined. The U.S. Supreme Court denied a stay of execution on the day of the execution. On February 10, 2000, shortly after midnight, Michael Donald Roberts was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester. He was 42 years old. His last words asked the Lord to forgive the witnesses. He told his family he loved them. He was pronounced dead at 12:21 a.m. After the execution, Attorney General Drew Edmondson said his thoughts were with the family of Lula Mae Brooks. Roberts became the 22nd person executed in Oklahoma since 1976 and the 611th person executed in the United States since that year. Lula Mae Brooks' family was not present at the execution. 6 witnesses came for Roberts. The case was closed. Michael Donald Roberts was buried. Lula Mae Brooks had died 12 years earlier, on January 16, 1988, in her own home, 3 houses away from the man who killed her. Story 7. Anthony Lee Cheney was born on April 4, 1954. He was a white male. There is very little public information about his parents or his childhood. It is not known where exactly he was born. It is also not known if he had brothers or sisters. His early family life is not recorded in any public document. What is known is that Cheney grew up in the United States. As a young man, he developed a strong interest in firearms. He learned a lot about guns. He liked to own them and handle them. People who knew him later described him as a person who knew guns very well. This interest in guns would become a large part of his adult life. At some point as an adult, Cheney got married. His wife's name was Diane Cheney. The two of them were legally married. However, later in his life, Cheney began a relationship with another woman. Her name was Deanna Jo Saunders Coleman. Cheney was still legally married to Diane when he started living with Deanna. Cheney and Deanna called each other husband and wife, but they were not legally married. This arrangement caused problems in his legal marriage. Diane Cheney became estranged from him. That means they stopped living together and stopped having contact. Cheney did not have a steady or lawful way of living. He did not hold a regular job for a long time. Instead, he moved from place to place. He and Deanna traveled together through several states. They did not have a permanent home. They lived by taking things that did not belong to them. Cheney had been in trouble with the law before. The court records show that he had prior convictions. That means he had been found guilty of crimes before the main events of this story. The exact details of those prior crimes are not fully described in public records, but it is known that he was not a first-time offender. By the early 1980s, Cheney was 28 years old. He was traveling with Deanna. They had been committing burglaries in multiple states. They would break into homes and take things that were not theirs. Cheney was especially interested in stealing guns. Whenever he found a gun in a home, he would take it. He kept many of these stolen guns with him. His habit was to collect firearms wherever he went. Cheney's way of life was to move from one place to another. He did not stay in one city for long. He and Deanna would drive from state to state. They would look for homes that were empty. They would break in and take valuables. Then they would leave. This pattern of behavior continued for some time. Cheney did not show any sign that he wanted to stop. He did not have a job. He did not have a legal home. He did not have a legal source of money. His only way of getting things was to steal them. By the summer of 1982, Cheney and Deanna had committed burglaries in Texas and Colorado. They had also stolen a vehicle. They were driving a truck that did not belong to them. They had many stolen guns inside the truck. Cheney did not care that he was breaking the law. He believed he could keep running and avoid being caught. He was wrong. At this point in his life, Cheney was 28 years old. He had a legal wife named Diane who he no longer lived with. He had a common-law partner named Deanna who traveled with him. He had a deep knowledge of guns. He had a habit of stealing, and he had no intention of stopping. That was the life Anthony Lee Cheney was living when he crossed into Arizona in early September 1982. Cheney and Deanna drove into Arizona as the 1982 Labor Day holiday weekend began. The date was September 6, 1982. They were driving a stolen pickup truck. The truck was black and had license plates with the letters WMD. They had stolen this truck in New Mexico after burgling a home there. Inside the truck, they had 11 stolen firearms. Cheney had taken these guns from homes they had broken into in other states. While driving in Arizona, Cheney and Deanna heard news that the police were setting up roadblocks. The police were looking for drunk drivers because of the holiday weekend. Cheney did not want to be stopped by the police. He knew the truck was stolen. He knew the guns were stolen. So he decided to leave the main roads. He found a rural area outside Flagstaff, Arizona. He planned to camp there until the holiday was over. He thought the police would stop looking for drunk drivers after the weekend. Cheney and Deanna parked the stolen black pickup in a camping spot. It was an unusual place to camp because it was not a regular campground. A Coconino County Sheriff's deputy named Robert Klein was on routine patrol. He saw the truck. He thought it was strange that people were camping in that spot, so he decided to drive closer and check on them. Deputy Klein drove his patrol car behind the pickup truck. He got out of his car. He used his radio to call the dispatcher. He gave them the description of the black pickup and its license plates. Then he walked toward Cheney and Deanna. He asked Cheney for identification. Cheney said his ID was in his truck. He said he would go get it. The deputy agreed and waited. While Cheney walked to the truck, Deputy Klein talked to Deanna. He asked her questions. While the deputy was distracted, Cheney did not get his ID. Instead, he took a gun and came back. He pointed the gun directly at Deputy Klein's head. The deputy was surprised and could not react in time. Cheney told Deanna to take the deputy's sidearm. That means his personal handgun that he wore on his belt. Deanna walked over and removed the gun from the deputy's holster. The deputy could not stop her because Cheney had a gun to his head. Then Cheney told Deanna to give him the AR-15 rifle. This is a semi-automatic rifle. It looks like a military M16, but is made for civilians. Cheney knew how to use this gun very well. Now Cheney had the AR-15 rifle pointed at the deputy. He told Deputy Klein to kneel on the ground. The deputy did what he was told. He was afraid he would be killed. So he started talking to Cheney. He told Cheney about his family. He hoped that talking would make Cheney feel sympathy. He also suggested that Cheney could handcuff him to a tree instead of killing him. That way, Cheney could escape without shooting anyone. While this was happening, the dispatcher back at the station got the results of the license plate check. The dispatcher learned that the black pickup was stolen. The dispatcher tried to call Deputy Klein on his radio to tell him, but Deputy Klein did not answer. He could not answer because he was kneeling on the ground with a gun to his head. The dispatcher became worried. So the dispatcher called another officer to go to the location and check on Deputy Klein. That other officer was John B. Jameson. He was a reserve deputy. He was also a medical doctor. He was 40 years old. He worked as a part-time deputy because he wanted to help his community. Deputy Jameson got into his patrol car and started driving toward the area. But the area was rural. The roads were dirt roads. It was hard to find the exact location. So Deputy Jameson drove slowly, checking each area along the way. Back at the campsite, Cheney decided he needed more control of the situation. He handcuffed Deputy Klein to a tree. He told Deanna to disable the two-way radio inside Deputy Klein's patrol car. Deanna did that. She broke the radio so it could not be used. Then Cheney took the keys to the patrol car. He and Deanna got back into the stolen black pickup. They drove away. Deputy Klein was left handcuffed to the tree. He could not move, but he had a spare key hidden on himself. After Cheney and Deanna were gone, and after he felt it was safe, Deputy Klein took out the spare key. He unlocked the handcuffs. He ran to his patrol car. He tried to use the radio to call for help, but the radio was broken. Deanna had disabled it. At the same time, Deputy Jameson was still driving slowly up the dirt road. He was looking for Deputy Klein. Suddenly, he saw the black pickup truck coming toward him. He called the dispatcher on his radio. He asked, "Black Ford pickup?" He was confirming that this was the stolen vehicle. Cheney saw the patrol car. He stopped his truck. He grabbed the AR-15 rifle. He jumped out of the truck. He started walking toward Deputy Jameson's car. As he walked forward, he began firing the rifle. He fired shot after shot. Deputy Jameson threw himself down onto the seat of his car. He tried to hide from the bullets, but Cheney kept firing. He fired more than 30 bullets in total. Deputy Klein, who had freed himself from the tree, was now talking to the dispatcher. He was describing Cheney and Deanna. Then he heard the gunfire. He grabbed a shotgun from his patrol car. He ran toward the sound of the gunfire, but he was too far away to stop what was happening. The bullets from Cheney's rifle hit Deputy Jameson's car again and again. Glass shattered. Metal pieces flew. More than 200 pieces of glass and metal struck Deputy Jameson's body. One bullet nearly cut off his left arm completely. Cheney kept walking closer to the car. He did not stop shooting. When he was only 9 feet away, he fired again. This time he was so close that the gun left powder burns on Deputy Jameson's body. Then Cheney stopped shooting. He turned around and walked back to his truck. He got in. He told Deanna 2 things. He said, "Murder one." That is a term for first-degree murder. Then he said, "Reload." He wanted more bullets ready. As Cheney and Deanna drove away, Deanna looked back. She saw Deputy Jameson trying to drive his car, but he could not. He was too badly hurt. Deputy Jameson was conscious for about 30 minutes after the attack. He was a doctor, so he understood what was happening to his body. When medics finally arrived, he told them, I'm dying, and I can't breathe." Cheney and Deanna drove away from the scene, but they knew the police now had a description of their black pickup truck. So Cheney decided to steal a different vehicle. Soon they saw 2 boys in another pickup truck. Cheney told Deanna what to do. Deanna walked to the passenger side window of the boys' truck. She started talking to them to distract them. At the same time, Cheney walked to the driver's side. He pointed his gun at the driver. He told both boys to get out of the truck. The boys did what he said. They were scared. Cheney told them to kneel on the ground next to the truck. Then he and Deanna moved their stolen items from the black pickup into the boys' pickup. Before he left, Cheney told the boys to run away. He also told them that he had handcuffed one deputy to a tree and had shot another deputy. The boys ran. They hid behind trees because they were afraid Cheney would shoot them in the back. Cheney drove the newly stolen pickup truck toward Flagstaff. He needed to put gas in it. He did not know that the 2 boys had already contacted the police. Within minutes, the police had a description of the new stolen vehicle. Police cars began moving toward Flagstaff. The 2 boys who had been forced out of their truck ran to safety. They found a telephone or a radio and contacted the police immediately. They gave the police a description of their stolen pickup truck. They also described Cheney and Deanna. The police now had a new vehicle to look for. They sent this information to all patrol cars in the area. In Flagstaff, police officers spotted the stolen pickup truck. Cheney was driving it. He had stopped to put gas in the truck. The police did not arrest him right away. They wanted to wait until he left Flagstaff. They hoped to catch him on a road with fewer people around. There were many police cars in the area. Cheney noticed them. He told Deanna that he was in the middle of all the police cars, but they did not know it was him. He was wrong. The police realized that Cheney had seen them. The element of surprise was gone, so they moved in quickly. They surrounded the truck. They arrested Cheney and Deanna without any more shooting. After the arrest, Cheney asked the arresting officer how the deputy was doing. The officer told Cheney to shut up. Cheney did not say anything else. The police then went back to the scene where Deputy Jameson had been shot. Deputy Jameson was taken to a hospital, but his injuries were too severe. He died from his wounds. He was 40 years old. He left behind a family, including a 10-year-old daughter named JoBeth. His death was ruled a homicide. The investigation then began in full. The police collected evidence from both crime scenes. They found the handcuffs that had been used on Deputy Klein. They found the broken radio. They found the stolen guns inside the truck Cheney had been driving. They also found the black pickup that Cheney had abandoned. They took photographs and measurements of the shooting scene. They counted more than 30 bullet holes in Deputy Jameson's car. They documented the powder burns on his body. All of this evidence was kept for the trial. Deanna Jo Saunders Coleman decided to cooperate with the prosecutors. She agreed to tell the court everything that had happened. In exchange, she was allowed to plead guilty to a lesser charge. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She also testified against Cheney at his trial. For her cooperation, she received a prison sentence of 21 years. She did not serve the full 21 years. Records show she served 14 years before being released. Cheney was indicted by a grand jury. He faced multiple charges. The charges were first-degree murder, kidnapping, aggravated assault, 2 counts of armed robbery, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of theft. The state also said that Cheney had 2 prior criminal convictions. This meant he could face longer sentences. The trial began on February 16, 1983. The prosecutors were John Verkamp and Charles D. Adams. The presiding judge was William F. Garbarino. Cheney had defense lawyers. They argued that Cheney had mental problems. They said he suffered from a mental disorder that made him violent. They asked for tests and expert witnesses. The court allowed 6 experts to examine Cheney. 5 days of the trial were spent on his mental status. The jury heard all of this evidence. On March 17, 1983, the jury found Cheney guilty on all charges. He was also found guilty of the prior convictions. The trial then moved to the sentencing phase. For the first-degree murder charge, the court had to decide if there were any aggravating factors. Aggravating factors are things that make a crime worse. The court found one aggravating factor. The murder was especially heinous, cruel, and depraved. The court then looked for mitigating factors. Mitigating factors are things that might reduce the punishment. The court found no mitigating factors at all. On April 20, 1983, the judge sentenced Cheney. For the kidnapping, he received 28 years in prison. For the aggravated assault, he received 21 years. For each armed robbery, he received 28 years. For burglary, he received 20 years. For theft, he received 11.5 years. All of these sentences were ordered to run one after another, not at the same time. For the first-degree murder, the judge imposed the death penalty. After the sentence, Cheney began filing appeals. He tried to overturn his conviction or delay the execution. He filed a direct appeal to the Arizona Supreme Court. On July 26, 1984, that court affirmed the convictions and sentences. That means they agreed with the lower court. Then Cheney filed a petition for post-conviction relief in the Arizona trial court. It was denied. The Arizona Supreme Court denied review on August 20, 1985. Cheney then took his case to the federal courts. On October 8, 1985, he filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. That is a legal way to challenge a prison sentence. The federal district court denied it. He appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. On September 11, 1998, the Ninth Circuit also denied his appeal. He tried to take the case to the United States Supreme Court, but he did not file his papers on time. The Supreme Court rejected his request because it was late. Cheney filed more appeals in state court. He filed a second post-conviction petition in April 1998. It was denied on November 9, 1998. He filed a third post-conviction action. Then he withdrew it on October 25, 1999. He also asked the Arizona Board of Executive Clemency for a reprieve or commutation. That means he wanted to have his death sentence reduced to life in prison. The board heard testimony from Sheriff Joe Richards and Deputy Robert Klein. Deputy Klein said he still suffered from the trauma of that day. He said he needed closure. The board unanimously denied Cheney's request. On January 6, 2000, the Arizona Supreme Court issued a warrant of execution. It set the date for February 16, 2000. Cheney's lawyers made one last attempt. They argued again that Cheney had a mental disorder and had not been properly tested. The prosecutors said 6 experts had already examined him. The court rejected the final appeal. On February 16, 2000, Anthony Lee Cheney was 45 years old. He was taken to the execution chamber at Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence. He was strapped to a gurney. A witness saw him glance at his friends, purse his lips, and shake his head. He was asked if he wanted to say any last words. He said, "No," very firmly. Then he gave a thumbs up to his friends. At 3:07 p.m., the lethal injection drugs began to flow. Cheney closed his eyes. He let out a sigh. His chest rose once, and then stopped. At 3:10 p.m., he was pronounced dead. He became the first person executed in Arizona in the year 2000, and the 20th person executed in Arizona since the state resumed capital punishment in 1992. After the execution, Cheney's body was cremated. His personal possessions became the subject of a legal fight between his estranged legal wife, Diane Cheney, and a professor who had befriended him. Deanna Jo Saunders Coleman served her reduced sentence and was released from prison after 14 years. Deputy Robert Klein continued his law enforcement career. He later worked for the Flagstaff Police Department. Sheriff Joe Richards said after the execution that he was glad it was over, but that the event brought back the emotions of the original shooting. Deputy John B. Jameson's family, including his daughter JoBeth, was left to grieve a man who had served his community both as a doctor and as a reserve sheriff's deputy. The case of Anthony Lee Cheney was closed.